Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.
Well, I certainly use photography myself. I've got an iPhone 12 and I use the camera and I end up photographing my own artwork. And I sometimes photograph material that I may draw, but I end up using photography as subjects for my work because I work mostly with animals, wildlife, birds mostly, and you can't go out there and very well take your own photographs of all these birds. So I use a couple of sources that I get from Pixabay, which is from photographers that allow anybody to use their sources as material for drawing or whatever they want to do. And these aren't amateur photographers, some of them. They're very good. So I take usually some photographs and maybe combine them, or there's another one that's called Morgue File, which photographs aren't as good. But I have to have something as a basis for the material that I end up drawing. And as I said, you can't go out and get a picture of well, you can get local birds here, but you certainly can't get any of the owls or anything like that I like drawing. So I use photography a lot, but I don't take very many that I actually use myself.
Elisabeth. Perfect. I love it. Okay, so before we dive in, just to give people some context, because it sounds in the audio it comes out. So it's a large room. You invited me into your home. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'd rather do it here than over online.
Welcome to Shooting It Raw, the podcast. And so essentially the podcast asks, if life is a gift, how do we make every second count? And what I love about these happy accidents of how I meet people is that, like in your case, I was at a coffee shop and I just looked on the wall, and we see so many things in the day. For something to break through the consciousness, to inspire and ignite the imagination, that's exactly what happened. And it was it was one of your works of an owl.
Oh, yes.
Snowy owl or something.
Yes, it was probably a print called Camouflage, which was, I'm not sure what kind of an owl was, but it was against a tree. That it was. Yes.
Amazing.
And I've done a few of those, and I've actually, that was when I used to do stone lithography, which is a different work that I'm doing right now. And you make prints, and I probably made about maybe a dozen of these prints, and out of the dozen, I think already perhaps about 4 or 5 have sold, so it's one of the popular ones.
I have to say to listeners, or whoever sees this, is that do check out your website, because your work is bonkers. It's so good. It's so good. Like I told you this would be a lot. This would be a lot of flattery, a lot of ego. All here to because your work is amazing.
That's always welcome.
Yes. Okay, so you invite me to your house, which is overlooking. We're in Vancouver, overlooking. It's a gray day outside. Inside, go ahead.
We're looking at Olympic Village that you can see over there.
Right, Olympic Village. Inside is your work. You have triptychs on the wall of owls. You've got.
That's not mine.
It's not yours?
No, I bought one. I had to buy it.
That's not yours?
That one is not mine.
It's not, okay, so I'm pointing to a piece on the wall, which is a kind of like a bas-relief of a painting, sort of.
Beautiful snow scene. It reminds me of skiing when I was very young. That's why I bought it. I bought it at a little gallery over off of South Granville.
Okay, where did you grow up?
In Calgary. I was born in Calgary, and I went to the Alberta College of Art as soon as I got out of high school. I knew I wanted to be an artist for a long time.
Yeah. Your house is so BC. It's outdoors. There's an otter sculpture, like a sea otter sculpture on the floor. There's like the colors are all grays, and I mean, I love it. I love it all.
Thank you. Thank you. And those 3 behind me, the 3 feathers, they're all mine.
Amazing.
I actually donated a print, each of those, to a new building that's being built at Lionsgate Hospital. They're doing a floor that they're wanting to hang paintings on, and what the theme is feathers. So not all these are one of each of those has been donated to the Lionsgate Hospital.
Yeah, just it's an like a podcast is audio, so it's theater of the mind. People can't be in the house with us. They can't see or really appreciate like the texture and the tones and everything about it is just so nice. And so we'll dive into your art. I don't know what you sent, so I'll look at the photo.
Okay.
And then hopefully in that sense, I'll be able to inspire people because,
Okay.
I mean, it's like, if you think about it, here's some random guy who goes for a coffee, looks on the wall, and he sees the evidence of your work.
I've had a lot out of that. I'll tell you, there's a real story behind that one. You looking at it, because there's been others that have bought it.
Yeah.
And one that, I mean,
did you just kind of squeeze me to buy it, not just talk about it?
No, I did not.
I'm just kidding.
But one woman saw one of the pieces that was there, and she bought it, and she came to my home, and she bought about $5,000 worth of artwork.
Oh, wow.
And she also got me into I'm now in a thing called Artists for Conservation. And,
okay. Clearly.
There's so many things that developed out of just my things being being around the world. It's quite amazing. Yeah. It's been amazing. I'm going to tell Max that. He's the owner.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let's go into the first photo.
Okay.
It's the image of you in a studio, not in this building, not in this house. This is a proper studio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're going to have to walk me through this because it's jaw-dropping. So let me just describe it, though. So you're standing dead center in the frame. You're holding up the edge of a piece of paper that's probably almost 1 meter wide by 3/4 of a meter long, or whatever it is. You're pulling it back, and it's a print. And this is the stone lithography?
Yes.
And then in the print, the photo is fantastic because you could see the studio of the workspace. And what is the stone you're etching into the lithography?
It's a big piece of limestone, and it's about originally it would have been 4 inches thick. It's probably thinner now because you actually draw right on the stone.
Yeah.
And you put it on what's called a graining sink, and then it's like sanding it right down, so it's absolutely flat. It's got to be as flat as the top of this table.
Yeah.
And if there is any indentations in it, when you're putting, it goes under pressure, you'll see a hollow, so it won't print. So this is the third of 4 colors that I'm doing on this particular print, which is about it's a young swan. I called it Signet. Mm-hmm. And when you end up doing this stone lithography, it's an old method. It was invented by a guy named Sennefelder about maybe 200 years ago. And
so not actually that old.
Well, it's not that old, really.
But amazing. The details.
But it's a really difficult medium to work in. I worked at Malaspina Printmaker Studio. This is down on Granville Island. Mm-hmm. And after 20 years of pulling off these stone lithographies, which you can see behind me and all over my house, you have to bend over and use these heavy rollers. Right. And when you're drawing, you have to be up on a kind of a counter, and you can't sit. You bend over. Right. So my back has just gone. I couldn't do it anymore. Sure. So I had to kind of quit, and I'm doing different mediums right now. But this is so satisfying because when you work on that stone, you use a special greasy pencil. Yeah. And you draw on it just like you would draw on a piece of drawing paper, but it's greasy. And I do really, really detailed stuff. There's one piece that I did of some rocks with some cormorants on it. It took me 70 hours to draw.
Insanely detailed.
Yes. And then what you have to do is you have to give it, it's a kind of a chemical etch. It isn't like digging in. The stone is always level on the surface. Yeah. But the theory is that water and oil don't mix. Yeah. So that's why the lithographic crayons that I use to draw, and you've got to sharpen them all the time because they're quite soft, they go onto the stone. And when you end up doing your finished drawing, it's all ready to go. You have to do just this kind of a chemical etch that just more or less stabilizes the image on the stone. Yeah. And then you get it onto the printing press. There's 2 printing presses at Malaspina. This one is an electric one, and rather than having to crank it, you use it as an electrical thing. So you put your piece on there, and you take the whole image off, and then you end up rolling it up. You sponge it with water, and the water gets repelled by the oily, the kind of greasy surface that you've drawn with. And then when you're putting on the ink, like you put it on with a roller, and it adheres to only the image you've drawn, whereas the open part of the stone absorbs the water, and it won't print. And if you look at any of the posters, for instance, by Toulouse-Lautrec, same method. So that was what they use. And of course, anything this is before kind of the digital era came by. Right. All the kind of lithographs that you would see would be any magazine or anything like that. It was something called offset lithography.
Yep.
And of course, it's called offset because you have a blanket that goes in between, which when you print here, everything comes out backwards. And if you do the offset, because there's an offset blanket, it goes through twice and it prints it on the right side.
Right.
But I can remember I was doing one piece of Bowen Island. I'd gone to visit a friend, and he had a property there their family had owned for years, and I took some photographs. And I ended up starting an 8-color lithograph. Like each color that you print has to end up being printed on top.
Right. 8 layers.
Yeah, in layers. So you can see the complexity and the registration that you've got to use. But anyway, I started this thing and I started printing it. And after 2 colors, I realized that what I usually do when I get an image, I take it in my computer and I flip it so it's backwards.
Right.
So then when you draw it, when you print it, it's the other way around, which is the right way. But
I'm going to interrupt for a second. I'm going to put a pause just because you've thrown a lot of words and ideas, and it's kind of funny, like the pace and the intensity and the energy is really, I'm with you 100%. I love it. And I'm just trying to think of somebody who's listening. First of all, you have to go online to look at this because the detail, the fine detail is just incredible, like in terms of, because you have so much texture within that. So do you have to actually draw in, do you have to illustrate the texture, or is that actually somehow within the medium?
Well, because you end up sanding it down, it's like you use gradually finer sand, like it's a grit that you use, like a coarse grit, and then you rinse that off and you use a medium grit and then a very fine grit, but it leaves a little bit of a tooth on the top of the stone. So when you draw, it's just like you're drawing on a textured piece of paper. And the things that the grain, it's only kind of on the surface. So it's one of the most difficult things to explain whenever I've been maybe in an art fair.
Well, I think ultimately, I think it's a process. It's like if I were to explain the chemistry of black and white photographs,
indeed,
it can be quite complex. But ultimately, it's also the result, and so like it just stops you in your tracks. So let's rewind the tape. I don't know how many years. A couple of years, let's say. Let's rewind the tape a couple of years where you started. Where you learned how to do this. So when did you learn how to do this? How did you start?
Well, I was a graphic designer all my life. I went to the Alberta College of Art and I got my art degree, and then I moved out to Vancouver.
Okay.
And I ended up starting my own business, and I ran my own business for about maybe 30 years.
Oh, okay.
And it was very successful, but after a while, of course, it was kind of time to end up thinking about retiring. And I knew I wanted to end up doing something in fine art, and I never really liked painting. I'm such a precise person. Painting is much more of a fluid. Yes, indeed. So I started taking some courses out at UBC, and I discovered what was called plate lithography, which is not drawing on a stone, but you draw on it's a different. I'm not going to explain.
No problem.
But anyway, I decided I liked this, but I took a course at Malaspina, and it was an evening course. And over 6 weeks, I learned the process. And drawing on stone is just like drawing on paper, and I really love drawing. I like it compared to painting. So to me, I just thought that's exactly what I want to do, and I joined Malaspina.
Amazing.
And I was still working with clients, but as gradually I decided to kind of transition, and I was working pretty well full time, for the last maybe 5 years at the time that I was,
So the image again is of you at the studio. You're pulling up, and I love how tactile it is. Like you have this beautiful smile on your face. The light's nice. It's so bright. It's so fun. It's also the satisfaction I know of peeling back the sheet. And so, what's the grain of this piece of paper? Like how thick is it? In terms of the
fairly thick.
Is it very textured or no?
Well, you can do any. I use it more or less kind of a smooth paper, but it's got to be soft so the ink will sink into it. If it's too hard, it will just lay on the surface. Because you have to end up, if you're doing multiple colors, you need to have it completely dry before you put the next thing on. And if you get just too many colors, there's only so many that you can do. But it's a very complex process.
And it's just, I've seen a lot of art in my life. I've seen a lot of images. And then when I saw this, I was floored. And, I want to say, like, Elisabeth is in the house, but I'm at your house. So of course you're in the house. This is great. Next photo.
Yes.
Would you want to say something else?
No, I was just going to say Malaspina itself is still going on, and they're still doing lithography there. It's not as popular because it's one of the most difficult things, but they've had a whole renovation in the studio down in Granville Island. They just finished it, so they've just opened it up again. And it looks much better than that. That's kind of a messy looking.
Right. Oh!
Well, that is one of my stone lithographs. And that one, I originally did one similar to it. I'll explain. It's a vertical print. It's 18 by 24. And it's birch trees. Yeah. And on the bottom, there's snow and a little creek. And there's about 20 crows that are there kind of bouncing around on this. And I called it the skating party. And this is a kind of a take on one I had done similar to it a number of years back, and it completely sold out. I'd only done about maybe 10 of the prints. Amazing. So I redid it, and I did 20 of them, and they're all sold. Yeah. So why something is popular and who knows? You just don't know.
Somebody who's used to black and white photographs and Ansel Adams style images knows about the changes in tone, and those are black and white. And here, very elegantly, so you've got the birch trees?
Yes, they're birches.
Birch in the front, the layer of birch in the front, no leaves. So it's just the bark with a black and white, very monochromatic. But in the back, they kind of become colorized to a more...
a warm tone.
A warm tone. Yeah. I mean, it's quite nice. There's a bit of black, a bit of tan. It's very stark because it's very Canadian. So it's like nothing is alive except for these poor treeless leafless trees. And there are 12, I assume 12 crows? It's right behind me.
That's a huge piece that's exactly the same, but I had it, it was at its show down on Granville Island. And they ended up blowing the image up and putting it onto brushed aluminum. Yep. And it sat outside for 6 months at a show right next to the ocean cement plant.
Amazing.
And so the birds, I try to do a relationship between the animals, like the birds that I do, as if they're kind of talking to each other.
Well, okay, so these are crows or ravens?
They're crows. Okay. They're crows, yeah.
Okay, so the thing with crows, now that I've moved back, I live in Vancouver, in North Van, we have, and my roommates and I are just really animal-centric. We have a relationship with a lot of the animals. Yeah. So be it it's the crows and then the Stellar jays.
Stellar's jays, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a crow is definitely, like for somebody who has a dog, you say, dogs have personalities. Some people, but people who never had dogs are just like a dog's a dog. In the same way that a crow, once you enter their world, you realize, oh, wait a second, this is a very social group and all this stuff. And
they are, yeah.
And you can call it a skating party.
Yeah, I like to give kind of a humorous, when you always have to title something, because on the bottom of a lithograph, you put in the edition number and you put the name of the print and then you sign it. Right. And whenever I'm doing it, I like to do something, that's kind of appealing.
Whimsical.
Whimsical. Yeah. I'm not really I don't do serious things. I think I do things that I kind of...
Well, your energy is really warm and you're smiling very easily, which people can probably hear. And it's fun. It's fun. It's not fun. Well, no.
It is kind of fun in a way.
Is fun the right word?
I mean, I don't know what it's going to be like until you get the thing printed. It's
right.
And when I pulled off the last of this one, it worked out just perfectly. A lot of things can go wrong in lithography. You can get too much water. You can get ink that's too thick. You can, in fact, the one that I said I'd done 70 hours on the black and white portion of the drawing, I ended up not putting enough acid into the kind of so-called etch. And the shadow of what was on the stone before that I'd sanded off was showing through. And I had to ditch it and do the whole drawing all over again. So it's really a difficult way of doing things. But back to the titling, I just really like having a little bit of fun. And I think people really, really enjoy the...
BC is outside. In terms of the energy, in terms of the connection, in terms of life. Well, and look, like living in Hong Kong. Have you ever been to Hong Kong?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so Hong Kong is alive in a way that it's basically subtropical.
Yeah.
So alive.
Yeah, I can't imagine it. I just can't imagine it.
Well, I'll send you photos. It'll blow your mind. Like it's so beautiful, but in a very different way. And what's interesting about BC is the interface between nature and the people. Your art, in a way, speaks so much about who you are. And in this case, you've got these crows together, and I like it. You can even see like they're all stepping in a way, and they all have the personality of one is looking at the ice, one is kind of sticking his foot out. They're playful, curious, and it's like looking at a population of people, really.
Well, I love crows, and I mean, I live in this area, and every night there are masses, thousands of them, as everybody in Vancouver knows, and they go over the top. And sometimes, like I know a couple of weeks ago, it was a very windy day, and these crows, they're all they're going up, and then they're diving and circling, and they're all doing it together, and they're all playing. Yeah. They're so smart. They're corvids, which is a family. That's the Stellar's jays, and it's also whiskey jacks, which are the little birds that you see.
Best name for a bird ever.
Yeah, or can't they call them camp robbers sometimes?
Okay.
I just finished doing 2 pieces of those birds, and they're Canada's national bird now. They were just voted in, I think, a couple of years ago. Okay. Yeah, but I really love birds, and when you live in a place like Vancouver, there is so many. There's trees. The only thing that we don't get here is your Stellar's jays. They like being more in the evergreen forest. You get them in North Van. Sure. I've seen a couple of them here towards UBC, but we don't get them very much. But
in our house, there's their pair, a couple. They would literally come through the back door, hop through the house, and go out the balcony. Like they've figured out that this weird cave. I'll show you the video later. This weird cave. They come in. They're just like peanuts.
Oh, right.
Peanuts, and then you see them just hopping. Like, sorry, no peanuts. They hop. Like, imagine they come in through there, they hop through the house, and they go out through there, and you're just like,
I'm not surprised.
Mind blowing.
Yeah, they really are, and of course they're just everywhere in Vancouver. You just can't go walk a block without seeing a crow. Yep. And I did one actually. One of my recent drawings. I did one of the 2 crows, and they've got peanut stuffed in their mouths. I called it peanut gallery. Yeah, exactly. Again, a kind of a lighthearted name, but I love crows. I get 2 of them visiting all the time. Sure. They put mussels. They throw mussels into my bird bath. Oh, okay. They wash them just like raccoons do. Okay. And there's 2 of them that come quite regularly and kind of eat stuff out. They can't eat out of my bird feeder because they can't get in through the squirrel cage. But
So let's go back then, because you dropped that little hint. You grew up in Calgary?
Yep.
And then you had a business.
I finished high school in Calgary. I took 2 years of art school at the Alberta College of Art. It was an excellent art school.
Clearly, look at your work. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. And then because we were also into skiing, because of course Banff was only just a short drive away. So I lived in Banff for a couple of years. And I got married in Banff, and because my husband, this is years ago, he lived in Vancouver, so that's how I got to Vancouver. And I got my first job in Vancouver as, we called them commercial, it was commercial art at the time. It's called graphic design now. But I got the first job that I ever had doing this, and gradually I started my own business about 2 or 3 years later.
What kind of business, because I'm also a business consultant, so what kind of business was it?
At that time, people ended up using letterheads and logos, and so I would design logos and brochures, annual reports for a lot of companies, West Coast Transmission, the Vancouver Stock Exchange. I designed their annual reports. Oh, wow. And I had a staff of 4 at one time, and it was very satisfying, and I was, mind you, it was a lot of work too. But I mean, I really enjoyed it, and it's just something about really loving what you do that's so important to me. I just really enjoyed everything. But anyway, as I said, then I started gradually transitioning over to trying to do some fine art, because if you're I'm a very early morning person. So if I'm running my business, I'd get down to the studio that I was running at sometimes 4:30 in the morning, because you could get all the work done before the phone started ringing. Sure. So you don't want to end up doing any painting or drawing or anything at night. So I didn't do basically any kind of fine art at all, other than some illustration for different things like calendars. But
Just quickly. Yeah, quickly. You have a website?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's elisabethsommerville.com. And my
Elizabeth
name,
with an
S. Yes. I think my mother, it's the French way of spelling Elisabeth.
Yes.
Everybody spells it with a Z though.
Yeah, it is okay. You know, they misspell everything. You know, the English, they think they own everything. They just say whatever.
Oui, oui.
Oh, oui, oui, above, you know, we will not do it.
My nickname is Betty, actually. I've been going by Betty for a number of years, but I figured that as an artist I should be serious and I should use my real name. So.
Yeah. If one were to do a kind of fill up a huge gallery with all of your work, how many pieces? In the hundreds, or like what?
Well, as far as actual, if you're counting the editions of the prints, it would definitely be in more like 1,000 anyway. But the individual compositions that I ended up printing, like say I just did one of them, I would say maybe about 300, maybe.
Wow.
Maybe. Yeah. I'm guessing, but maybe 200. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
It's not like, I know painters I envy painters because, you have somebody that's a very good watercolorist. They can do a painting in a day or an afternoon. Right. And it's because they're loose. And I just don't have that skill.
Sure.
Each person's got their own skills. And I really appreciate somebody that can do a wonderful painting. And I just don't like doing it. Yeah. I love drawing.
Right.
I really
Speaking of which, like, I was just reminded now, when I was in university, I had a roommate. And she was studying fine art at Concordia, and she would do these graphite or pencil drawings that were so realistic. Yeah. It's like looking at a black and white photograph. Yeah. But the thing is, I feel that's kind of disingenuous because when we see your prints, even though, the feathers are blown up and they're humongous, but like the owl, the detail is so amazing that your brain immediately at first thinks, oh, that's a black and white photo, but then you realize no, that's not drawing. That's a hand-drawn artifact. That's just incredible.
And people that I've seen what you're talking about. I can do those incredibly detailed graphite, which is lead pencil. I can do that, but I just would rather draw something with a bit of color. I'm very subtle. I don't use bright colors. I just can't stand doing bright colors. I'm very, as you see around
your house. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so we'll move on to the next photograph because I just love your work.
Thank you.
Your work. Because look, I went to art school or had art school. I know all about this sort of thing. And if one were to ask me what aesthetic I gravitate to, it'd be more conceptual art.
Yes.
Which arguably is, you can't really paint or draw, so you call it conceptual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I love abstract art. I learned about abstract art too. There's good abstract art and there's bad abstract art. So I certainly appreciate that. That's just from going to art history in art school and what I've learned, because I really love, anytime I go to any city, I go to the museums, the art museums all the time. Yeah.
Well, but ultimately, like, what I responded to is the emotional reaction. Like, who cares what my tastes and aesthetic is? It doesn't matter. I saw your print and I was like, I have to contact this person.
That's great.
And here I am.
You're so happy.
Yes.
So happy you're here.
I am delighted.
Now this is, do you want to explain? Do you want to explain it? There's more birch trees too.
I love it. Okay, so you're such a Canadian.
Well, yes, I am.
For the listener, a birch tree is a white. Okay, so it's a tree without. Well, certainly in the fall or whatever. It's not a very leafy tree, and the birch, like the bark, is white, almost papery. And what breaks through that white or papery bark is the knots, which are often black. And in this image, so roughly in the center is an owl looking off its shoulder. Now, I personally think owls and pelicans in my brain are the most fascinating birds. Mm-hmm. So what kind of owl is this?
It's a boreal owl.
Boreal, okay. So it's mostly black and white. It's got a bit of brown on its shoulders. It's looking over its shoulder at something with these bright yellow eyes. It's very monochromatic in the background, so it's just these birch, these white and black non-leaf trees, and just kind of there, and kind of more in the foreground are these other kind of trees. What kind of tree is this?
That would be a young birch. Because the thing with birches, they don't have big limbs. They don't get foliage until the top of the tree. So these are just young ones. So the color, there's some yellow leaves in there.
Yeah, yellow and green, a little bit brown. Yeah.
So they're just they're young trees growing up. They might not even be birches. I don't even know.
No, because it says among the aspens.
Aspen.
Oops.
That's a relative. Yeah. Birches and aspens, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Okay.
I think...
well, I certainly can't.
Well, I can't either. I think those are aspens. I think, but they do basically look the same.
So how is this different than...
Well, this is a completely different technique. I painted this.
Okay. And after you just spent all that time.
Well, the thing is, this is not something that is a very easy way to paint.
Yeah.
It's a technique called egg tempera.
Okay.
Now, egg tempera was something that was used all the time before oil paint was discovered. So it's a really old technique.
Okay.
And there's some very famous people like Andrew Wyeth and Alex Colville, which is a Canadian artist. They worked in egg tempera. And what it is you end up using raw pigment powder, and then you end up putting egg yolk. Egg yolk. And you put egg yolk, you mix that in with a little bit of water, and the egg yolk acts as a binder. You know what it's like if you get egg yolk drying on your plate? It hardens. But you have to apply it in very tiny little brush strokes. I use thin little brush strokes. So each one of those, there's no broad brush stroke. It took me hours to do that darn thing. It took me 3 months to do that painting.
Okay, so the background, the far background is kind of greenish, kind of brown, lots of like a very dark black that's almost green.
Yeah.
And the sky, if there is kind of more gray, but again, quite greenish. And then the birch, or the
aspen, I guess.
Aspen, whatever it is. The white of it. So this is all purely pigment. Okay.
Yeah. There's you have to do this on a. You can't do it on paper. You have to do it on a prepared. It's like it's not masonite, but it's like a plywood, and you have to end up putting on a gesso. It's something that oil painters use to prime their canvases. But this is something you have to make out of rabbit skin glue and calcium carbonate powder and mix it all up, and you have to end up putting 10 layers of this darn stuff on, because the egg tempera has to end up absorbing into it a certain way. You can see it's so complicated, and
the way you describe it is like, why did you do it? I was punishing myself.
I think I'm a masochist. I really do, but the thing is, again, it's detailed. It's almost like drawing with a paintbrush. So I really enjoy doing this, but it just got to a point. I did this for a couple of years, and I thought, I got to try something else.
How big is this print?
That would be about maybe 20 by 15. It's fairly large.
Hilarious.
It's fairly large.
Canadians are really funny.
Well, I don't work in centimeters. I'm too old.
But that's just it. So some of the things are centimeters, some of the things are inches. And it's true that for this, it's like you said, like 24 inches?
Well, it's probably not 24. I'd have to get the board out. I've got it stored right now. I make prints of these. I have them separated and scanned and made into digital prints, which but the thing is, these darn things, you can't even start thinking about framing them, because they've got a cure for about 6 months.
Okay. I love your relationship to the medium.
As I said, there I was with all these boards. It's interesting because there's, I don't know whether you've ever heard of a man called Ken Danby. He is a very well-known painter. He died, I'm not sure how long ago, maybe about 12 years ago or something like that. But he did a famous painting of a hockey player. It was called At the Crease. Every Canadian that likes hockey would know this. Yes. And there's another famous one that he did of a man in a red slicker.
Hold on. Let's just wait for that.
Yes, I was talking about Ken Danby before we were so rudely interrupted. And most people know Ken Danby. He worked in egg tempera, and I had met him because he came to a party of mine because one of my friends invited him. This is when I was living over in Kitts Point, And he died I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly the circumstances, but his wife moved to Vancouver and she offered me some of the actual boards that he was using for his egg tempera painting.
Right,
so I bought about maybe a half a dozen from her.
Okay.
And so it was kind of nice to say that I'm printing, I think this was done on one of those panels. It was one of Ken Danby's old panels that he actually ended up doing all the gessoing and all the rest of it.
For the listener, again, roughly in centimeters, it's roughly about 60 by, let's say, 40 centimeters-ish. Okay.
It's not a small painting.
No, but it's, So what I like to do is, on the one hand, there's the image. In this case, it's it's a created image. But then the question is to pull back and say why. So in your case, it's like you're looking at it because it's egg tempera as the stage away from the prints. Mm-hmm. So is this because you're sharing your evolution, or is...
It's because I just couldn't physically do lithographs anymore. Because my back just kind of gave out because it's such a physical kind of a thing. And I knew that was going to happen to me, so I'd be kind of thinking about what I would do in advance. But I was thinking about maybe doing pastels, or I was thinking... But anyway, I cottoned onto this egg tempera technique, and I just really, really liked it. Yeah. So I kind of stuck with that for a few years. Mm-hmm. And I've done maybe about 10 of these paintings.
Okay. So this one is called Bold Deceivers, which you kind of foreshadowed a little bit earlier. And again, a very Canadian scene where in the far background are Douglas fir, I don't know, kind of fir trees.
Evergreens.
There is snow on them, hanging on. And then there's like a big wide field of white, of snow. In the foreground is what looks like maybe the gate, of like a wooden gate. And on it are these two magpies. I'm assuming they're magpies.
Yes, they're magpies.
Yes, they're magpies, just sort of looking at each other. There's just a little hint of blue, which is how you see a magpie. There's always a little hint of blue and purple in the magpie. Later, I'm going to show you a photograph of how these birds manifest in Hong Kong. And it's going to blow your mind.
Okay.
They also have magpies in Hong Kong.
Uh-huh.
So here, the relationship... One is looking at the other while one is looking away. It's kind of like they're an old couple that's been married for such a long time. So one of the magpies, one leg's up on the fence or the wood, and one leg is kind of down. And it's a very quiet, because of the snow. There's this feeling in my mind, this quiet, calm, hushed, cold. But there's this warmth between them of these magpies. And if people who know magpies, they're also very smart. Are they corvids?
Oh, yeah,
as well?
they're corvids as well.
Yeah, so they're also very smart.
I remember them from Alberta, when I lived in Alberta, because they're all over the place. But they don't live in BC, at least not in the West Coast.
Yeah, I haven't seen any here. No. So take it away. Why this one? What's this one?
Well, this one is my third kind of technique, and this is one of I've started working with colored pencils. Mm-hmm. Because I thought to myself, it's a colored pencil drawing.
Amazing.
Or a colored pencil painting, if you want to say that.
Amazing.
And again, because it took me so long to complete my painting, my egg tempera painting, I thought I'd try colored pencil.
Right.
And I'm just amazed at how complicated it is.
Okay.
And remember, you used to get the old Prismacolors when we were in art school. I mean, that's how long. Anyway, there are a lot of artists that work in this technique, and it's got layering, and it's got burnishing, and it's really a neat technique. And I'm so absolutely taken away with it that I think I might just stick with it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, maybe it's because for Calgary and me skiing, and I love stuff with snow in them.
Yep.
I do quite a few things that have snow in them. But the whole composition, I found one magpie on one of my photography sites, and another one, and I found that it's kind of the corner of a gatepost. I got that from another picture, and then I found the trees in another picture, and then I just fudged in the snow background. So when I do things, I don't take a photograph and copy it exactly. I try to end up putting my own composition in. Mm-hmm. And I just love this one. And actually, it took me about maybe instead of 3 months, it took me about maybe 3 weeks to draw.
Oh, yeah.
And it would be probably about, let's see, this, you put it in centimeters.
So we'll do it again. So let's put it in inches first.
I'd say it would probably be about 19 by 19 or something like that.
Okay.
Inches.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, it's square.
It's
a
square. I like
format.
the square format. Yeah.
So looking closer, there is the detail on the wings, and I love the hint of the blue. So I had a dog who was a Shar Pei of sorts, and the fur on her cheeks was this really fine kind of density, and we always used to say, "Oh, it's like feathers." And then when you look closely at these two, it's like the detail of your drawing ultimately is so well executed and so subtle. Yeah, it's really great. Like is it just I'm a Canadian and I love this stuff, or is it like?
It's hard to say. It may be. I mean, it is uniquely Canadian. Mind you, you say there are magpies kind of everywhere. Really, I mean, they're in Australia. They're all a different kind of. They maybe sound different. They're slightly different, maybe, but. You know, you say with the blue in them, you take a look and there's so many colors. It's this iridescence on feathers. Yeah. And you can look, and when you start to draw it, I mean, I've learned so much about birds since I've been kind of using them as subjects. But I mean, there's fine things, there's purples and lavenders. There's all these colors in iridescence. And you end up getting it in there, but when you start studying it, you realize just how much color there is in something that really looks just like, well, maybe a plain old blue or something like that. Or just
black or whatever, yeah.
And this particular piece, I really liked it. And I just started on Instagram a couple of years ago. So I posted this on Instagram. And I got a call maybe the next morning from someone who happens to be an artist himself who lives in Victoria.
Oh, okay.
And he said, I want to buy it, which he did. So I was quite pleased. He bought it. I did go and have it scanned in high resolution so that I could end up making archival digital prints of it. But that's one of my faves. Just it really is. I just love the composition. I don't know what it is. And you know, you learn this in art school, the composition. You know, I mean, this angle of the fence coming up and the bird's long tail this way and the horizontal. There's it's just a lovely composition. I think even the trees that are coming down and kind of focusing, they kind of lean in towards the actual birds themselves. Right. And of course, the birds are in a relationship. You can tell. They're not. They look like they're. I figured that they were two buddies, you know, looking for mischief. Sure.
Okay, well, let me rewind some more a little bit in terms of you're 10 years old. You're being shaped by the things around you, right? The trees, the animals, the winters, all the summers, all the stuff. Why illustration?
I really don't know. I mean, I've always wanted to be an artist. I used to draw horses all the time. And I can even remember when I was in kindergarten, I remember sitting at tables. I remember this long ago. The little kids wanted me to draw stuff for them.
Oh, for them. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I asked my mother when I was in grade 11, I wanted to quit and go because the art school in Calgary was so close. And she said, no, you're going to finish your senior matriculation. You're not going anywhere until, which was quite smart of her. Sure. But I mean, I just knew that that's all I wanted to do. Nice. It's a blessing. And you know, I don't know where the talent came in my family because I have two sisters and a brother. And none of them have the same talent. I think it came from my father's side of the family. I think there was a couple, but I mean, who knows? It's a gift. It's just an absolute gift. And
because sometimes maybe it's not something you need to understand. You can just accept it.
Yeah.
I think, did I mishear that you said something earlier, very quickly while we're at the door or something? You said that you're a Métis?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. How does that influence, or what does that mean?
I don't know. I mean, because my mother was born in Lebret, Saskatchewan, and she actually was a day student at a residential school. Okay. And she moved to Calgary and met my father, and they married. And she didn't identify as Métis. In fact, I think she just didn't want to talk about it. So we were French Canadian, whatever it might be. But I really think because of the things that I choose to draw, it might have something to do with that particular.
Okay.
I mean, I can't see it. It would have to end up being something almost incomprehensible, because I certainly wasn't kind of brought up in the wild or anything like that.
Right.
But I mean, I've always liked animals. I've just always liked animals. I was crazy, and I owned horses. But the birds, I don't know. It's just
Sure. Okay. Well, it could be ineffable, but let's bring it back.
Ineffable. That's the word I was trying to.
Ineffable. Okay.
Yes.
So let's go back then to, well, first of all, for somebody who's listening in from Singapore, the Philippines, Australia, what does Métis mean?
It means technically that in your background there is native Indian. I still refer to them as Indian. I mean, it is the Indian Act in Canada.
Right.
And originally it was intermarrying with, usually it was French traders like Courrier de Bois, that kind of a thing. It's really more of a Saskatchewan prairie kind of a thing. I know some people say that Métis that are living in the eastern part of Canada aren't really true Métis, but it's a definite. You're if you want to be rude about, not rude, but I mean you're a half breed.
Yeah, it is shooting it raw. You can say whatever you want.
Okay, that's good. That's good. But I mean, we didn't even know we were had anything. Had any native Indian in us until my brother ended up searching for it down in. Oh, excuse me.
Nope, there's no excuses. It's totally fine. It's acceptable. Word will, it could be, is it the Anthropology Museum? No.
No, it isn't. It's the Church of Latter-day Saints. They are Mormons.
Okay.
They're the ones that have this huge, enormous... They've
database?
got records. Database,
really?
Yes.
The Mormons.
Really do. The Mormons do.
I just learned something fantastic today.
There you are.
There we are.
But my brother ended up searching through, and he actually found kind of the record of my ancestry, which goes back to probably about 4 generations before you got to be not Métis, but you had the Indian, marrying the Caucasian.
So, like, you get shaped by the family you're born into. You get shaped by the culture that you're, responding in, that either consciously or subconsciously pulls you and pushes you in different directions. In this case, you have an ability to express yourself visually. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You have a sensibility that attracts you to the outdoors, to appreciating fauna.
Oh, yes.
So was there, or are there repeating experiences where you come face to face with the outdoors that really shape you? So, for example, in Hong Kong, I'll just...
okay.
Yeah, so in Hong Kong, I like to do wildlife photography, and there are classical-looking... what are these called? Like,
representational?
No, these birds. So
magpies.
So they're magpies, and they look like standard magpies, the big, beautiful, smart.
Yeah.
And there are these other kinds of birds called the red-billed magpie or something, and I'll show you the image later, and it'll blow your mind.
Oh, really?
And it's one of these moments that when you connect with them, like with a crow, with a dog, with a deer, with whatever, that there's something that transcends just human culture or whatever. So I've spoken a lot. Take it away. Like, what does that mean to you?
Well, as far as you can't very well have that in Vancouver, because, I mean, there is lots of green spaces. But, I mean, I think because I'm working so much, I notice things even when I'm walking up. I take a walk every day. I usually walk out for about a half an hour every morning. And you always see something. I think that this is something that when you're an artist, you end up looking for things, and it's almost like unconscious. But I really notice things.
You're sensitive.
I am. And I think it's just kind of not a training, but it's just something you think, well, I'm looking for my next subject. Like, I've just started a new piece. I just finished a very complicated drawing of again, it's a Eurasian owl. And I'm looking either through photography, but it's not generally from my environment here. I get maybe some background, but I get inspired just by looking at even the leaves, and you think, it's just the way that if you're ending up trying to create something like this, it's your mind think.
Sure.
And again, it's just something that's, ineffable.
Yeah.
It's just unconscious. And when I'm towards the end of a piece that I've been working on, I'm thinking, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? And that's what you're even more conscious than what you feel like doing.
Yeah, like I did performance art in Montreal, and how I would explain it to people is I was saying, well, you're never quite satisfied. Well, I'm not projecting on you, but this is like how I put it. I was never quite satisfied with the performance I was doing just then. It's the next one that's really the one. Yeah. And so in my mind, it's always the next one, however it manifests, right?
It's interesting. It's very interesting. I mean, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I always want to do better.
Have you seen your work? Have you seen your work? You're amazing.
Honestly, I still look at some of these. Like I just was, I applied and I was accepted to the Artists for Conservation.
Yeah.
And it's a worldwide, they had their annual festival up at Van Dusen Gardens just about a month ago.
Okay.
And I was accepted and I was just so proud to be accepted. But I got a hardcover book from this particular exhibition that they had, and I look at the work in there and I think, oh my God, it is so good. I just never think I'm good enough.
Well, that's interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, well,
I just because there's so many incredible artists.
There really are.
Yeah.
Really and you're one of them.
Well, I like to think so, but
just read the teleprompter. It says, "Oh, thank you." No, you really are.
Thank you.
You really are.
Thank you. I mean, I'm so lucky that in retirement, and especially through COVID, that I had something to do.
Yeah.
I look forward to getting up and working. I just absolutely love it. I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky.
I think the gratitude's important because that's and being conscious of it. So, for example, like the premise of this podcast is, that life is a gift.
Yes, it is. It is indeed.
And if it is, how do you make every second count?
Yeah.
And so how it manifests for you is to make these incredible prints and expressions that are just fantastic. And so how do we turn this little quirk in who you are into something that somebody who's listening will kind of say, okay, well, I'll pursue that. So did you ever hesitate? Or have you always been, no, this is just who I am, and this is what I'm going to do?
I have never felt sorry in my life pretty well for anything I've ever done. I really
so
haven't.
Not Canadian.
No, I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't go back and change. I mean, obviously there's things I wish I hadn't smoked for so long. I mean, things like that. But I mean, it's just something to me that I've just sailed through life, to me, doing things, they're challenging. I mean, I decided I'd drop everything and move to London, which I did for 2 years.
Please say London, England, and not London, Ontario.
England,
okay.
London, England, because my dad was born in Scotland, and I had so I got a British passport.
Okay.
And I worked over there, being the kind of design director at the British Airways when they did all the reconfiguration of their logo and all their
respect.
It was not me that did the designing. I was just doing the supervision of it, and I just really loved it. It was wonderful. But after a couple of years, I thought, I want to come home.
Sure.
You don't have I was about 45 at the time. And you don't kind of make the friends and the connections.
I'm laughing because I didn't like the weather in London, whereas the weather in Vancouver is the same.
Well, the weather over there was just bloody awful.
How's it different than now? That's so good.
But I mean, you're so close to everything. I managed
to,
and they sent me places. So that when I was working for them, I went to New York, I went to Rome, I went to Paris, and I really appreciated coming home and realizing what I had at home. I'm very optimistic. I've always been very optimistic.
Yeah, it radiates. Like but seriously, and the fact that you choose all these are choices. So you choose subjects, you choose compositions, you choose titles that are whimsical, that there's a brightness to them, and it's a reflection of who you are. I absolutely adore your work. I want people to check it out.
Oh, good.
And it's mastery.
I have a show coming up on Granville Island.
Come tell people, fly to Vancouver, come see the show.
Well, this is Granville Island, of course, is probably Vancouver's biggest tourist attraction, and that's for the studio that I worked at for 20 years. And one of the people that are there, his name is Peter Braun. He owns a printmaking studio called New Leaf Editions, and he has a gallery.
Wait. New Leaf
Editions?
Yep.
Yes, and it's right near the Granville Island Hotel. But I'm having 12 of my colored pencil drawings are all they're being hung on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And the show will open on the 8th of November, and it will go on until the 15th of December.
Sure.
And there's an opening happening on Saturday, the 12th of November. So,
and if you can't spring for the flight, just check out the website.
Yes, check out the website.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, it's something that I'm quite excited about. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what a treat to meet you.
Well, nice meeting you
so
too, Rand.
much.
It was delight. It was just a delight.
Great. You're fantastic. I love it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.